And talking about India's tariffs, what do you think are the possible options for India? Any do's and don'ts that you'd like to actually highlight?
Uh, again, so much has been said about what India can do or what India should do. So perhaps give me the liberty of starting the answer to this by saying what I feel India can't do, or what can be put into the negative list. And the first most important point that I have kind of written in one or two articles also is that, in the present context globally, and India is very much part of that global feeling, that foreign policy arguments will never prevail unless they are anchored in strong domestic foundations, domestic economic foundations. From that aspect, domestic policies will invariably trump foreign policy. And therefore, it will be impossible for any leader to give in to an external, let's say, pressure and agree to something which domestically is not viewed as okay. So at the moment, there's a strong sentiment within India saying that, look, we can't seem to give in. We don't want to give in. We are not going to be pushed to our knees. So, our leader, Prime Minister Modi, would find it very, very difficult to give in. And I think that's the reason I do recall in a speech very soon after these tariffs were put that he said, look, I might have to pay, in a public speech, I might have to pay a very high price for the kind of stand India has taken to preserve some of its key sectors, agriculture, dairy, fisheries, etc. So that's one. The second thing, which again, and I'm probably in the divisive camp on this, because I've read some people say, oh, we should temporarily stop buying Russian oil. I don't think that we should do that. Two reasons. One, purely economic. If you're getting, crude at a much lower price than what was available to us earlier, then why should we not do it? Isn't Europe buying gas from Russia? It is. And secondly, if you really look, I know we've had good relations with a number of countries over a 50-year period, but one constant, friend in need slogan can probably only be applied to Russia. So we shouldn't do that. The third, we already mentioned, while we must push and do all that we can to have a bilateral trade agreement with the US as early as possible, but not at the cost of what are our red lines. And we will have some red lines. We'll have some red lines on IP, some red lines on investment protection, and definitely some red lines on key products here. And the fourth, which again we cannot afford to do, is let there be job losses in our MSME sectors. Now, having said that these are four things that we can't do, then there are a few that I think the government is already thinking of doing, and I think that is what perhaps needs to be pushed. Clearly diversify. We will have to diversify our export markets. They're already to some extent diversified, but primarily we'll have to lower the dependence on the United States market. So we'll have to look, but that doesn't happen overnight. It always takes time. So that is something which may not be an immediate solution. Perhaps, therefore, we'll have to, in the short run, enhance the domestic consumption of those goods which are being exported to the US, provided there's a domestic market which is being, catered to by imports from other countries. So they'll have, there might be some issues here, but you will have to give that much time to the domestic industry. And obviously, during this time, the domestic industry will have to become, there's no doubt about it, more competitive and more resilience. Thirdly, I think a certain amount of reform in the overall Indian economy also, or, the kind of reforms, you could call it reforms 3.0, whether they relate to ease of doing business, whether they relate to many of our processes, our labor laws, land laws, our monetary and fiscal policies, even down to, much smaller thing. I mean, I was reading a paper about some of the processes involved with electricity distribution or the privatization of defense and nuclear production. I mean, there are many, many things that I think should be fast-tracked in order to make up for that 0.6 to 0.8% possible fall in GDP. And the fourth point with which I'll end is what India can do and must do is just continue to have a dialogue. My many years in WTO told me that no matter how hopeless a situation seems to be, no matter what kind of rhetoric has been used within the WTO rooms, committee rooms, but the dialogue, an open line of communication must be preserved. And we must continue to do that. So hopefully with these fours, what India can't do and the 4 points that India can do, hopefully we should be able to move forward positively.